Welcome to the best of the web in audio form. Strap in for some jolly good storytelling, and don't forget to like and subscribe. AskReddit question submitted by scared_shitless. What was your this shit I'm out moment? Submitted by Dexterous_Baronessa. I was at the first day of a job at a fiberglass place. I was working in a section unloading trailers. There was an incident with a forklift that resulted in a broken hand. Then I got absolutely covered in fiberglass dust. They didn't provide masks and I could feel the grit on my teeth. Everyone acted as if this was normal and even said the forklift driver was one of their safest drivers. By lunch, I said to myself, if one more thing is blatantly unsafe, I'm not coming back for a second day. Then we started putting stuff away in a different section. It involved people climbing up storage racks while people were working underneath. I didn't return. Submitted by Thunderclouds 1997. I was a temp worker in a factory that made mayonnaise. During my break I'd get a call from my mom's work. She's had 5 to 6 strokes at the same time. I went to my supervisor and told him what happened. When he replied with "Can't you wait until your shift is over?" I took off my uniform and left the building without another word. For those who are interested, her doctors told me my mom only survived because her coworkers reacted fast and because the clumps of blood cutting her blood flow to her brain were rather small. Submitted by Bucky 111. College roommate and I were in a Mexican border town, walking half drunk back to Texas when a guy in an alley opened a door and told us to come on in. Free beer, beautiful women. My roommate started into the room. You could see a couple girls across the room. As soon as I hit the doorway I caught a glimpse of several guys with their backs up against the wall to the left that we couldn't see from outside. I grabbed roommate by the collar and we ran back to the border. There were a lot of kidnappings in that area in the mid-90s. Submitted by the WhatsApp 34 meters. I was a shift lead at a fast food joint located inside of a gas station. Our manager was worthless at hiring people, so we were perpetually understaffed for months. I was working 50 to 60 hours a week. Absolutely ridiculous. However, company policy was that there had to be 2 people working at all times. This particular day, someone called out. Nobody would come in to cover the shift, so the manager was forced to stay and work a double. She decided that, since the only reason she was there was because we would have to close otherwise, she was just going to hang out in the office and chat with the gas station employees 3 hours into my shift, and I have been single-handedly running the front counter, the drive-through, making all the food, doing prep and doing dishes. The dinner rush hit. I had like 4 cars in the drive-through, 8 to 9 people inside, and then I ran out of onions. Because I couldn't get the prep done, my mind just quit. Brain turned off, emotions went cold. I ripped off my headset, told the people inside that they weren't getting their food, walked into the office, and tossed my name tag, manager card, and hat at my boss. When she turned around in shock all I said was good luck, and walked out the back. Submitted by an Alpdi. I was working at this bakery that makes cakes and gelatos that then get sold to grocery retailers like Fresh Market and Whole Foods to be sold in their bakery sections. This bakery was basically a reverse sweatshop where all the windows were boarded up. You worked Monday, Friday from 6 in the morning until 8 at night with 1 half-hour break. There was no music. We weren't allowed to talk. We had to be in uniform and couldn't wear jackets. It was kept at icebox temperatures so frostings wouldn't melt. It was soul crushing. Then the woman who worked as a janitor quit. Rather than hire someone else, they put me in that role when I'd been hired as a baker. I had to clean the front office, prepare all the shipping boxes, mop every mess, clean the bathrooms. I had 2 industry degrees and over 10 years of experience in culinary at that point. To be reduced to janitor, it was mind-numbing tedious work. One day, I came back from my lunch break and was told that someone had made a mess in the bathroom and I needed to stay after work to clean it. I went to the front office to talk to the woman who did most of the manage work. She was chatting with her daughter, who was a teenager who she'd hired to handle their social media, despite knowing that I had social media marketing and CRM skills on my resume. I waited and waited for about 20 minutes just standing there so I could talk to her about this. I'd thought the janitor thing was to help them out until they hired someone new, but after a month and a half, it was clear they had no intention of hiring someone else. That was just my job now. I wanted to talk to her about how that's not what I'd been hired to do, and to see if there was a way I could go back to my original job. Her daughter glanced at me a few times, but this woman, who was facing me, but never so much as acknowledged me, just kept ignoring me. So I just clocked out, got my stuff, and walked out. One of the bakery managers followed me out and said how I'd already taken my break and to get back to work. I said no, I'm not doing this BS anymore. She insisted I needed to tell the manager, the one who had just ignored me for 20 minutes, that I was quitting. I said I tried, and she could go screw herself for treating me like I'm subhuman. Even if I didn't have the experience or the education I have, even if I was some asshole off the street, I'm still a freaking human. Screw that lady. Screw that icebox sweatshop. Screw the owners. Screw the managers. Screw that whole place. Submitted by Acheron53. I was unemployed and had a job interview for a cable installer position. The position advertised for $20 an hour, 40 plus hours a week, and benefits, so it seemed like a pretty good deal. I get to the interview and find out it's actually 2 interviews, a group interview followed by one-on-one interviews with the hiring manager. In the group interview, HM explains that the position was actually minimum wage and commission. He also explains that we need to supply our own tools. He then tells us how they assign jobs and we have no choice over which ones we get. Right before the end of the group interview, one of the other guys asks if there were any other expenses we were responsible for, and HM tells us that we had to pay for our own gas, tires, and repairs on our assigned company van. I look out in the parking lot and saw all the vans looked like 20-year-old clapped out pieces of crap. As soon as HM went back to his office, I left. Submitted by Steel City 91. I recently quit my job as a call center worker after 4 years. For background, I worked in customer services for a popular retailer in the UK. During lockdown, when their stores were closed, we had increased sales from online, which also means we got increased call volumes. I busted my ass off to ensure that customers were happy with their purchases and resolved any issues they had to the best I could. One day, we got an email from our CEO saying that, even though we had the highest volume of online sales, we still would not be able to get a bonus due to the virus affecting the business as a whole. I only ever had a bonus once, when I was working there, and I'm used to not getting a bonus. What made me pissed off was that we got absolutely nothing in return. Not a pay increase, not extra holidays, not a token of gratitude, and not even a thank you letter for all the hard work. We also found out a couple days later via the mainstream news that the bigwigs at my company all got a pay rise. At this point, myself and a few other people went screw this shit and we all handed our badges at reception and left. I got a new job a week later without any problem and feel even better as a person. This was the first time ever in my life I walked out of a job in anger. Submitted by Casper Shadow. I worked at Produce Market when I was in college. I really needed the job. I literally had empty cabinets and only one shelf of food in the fridge on a regular basis. I had been working weekday evenings only for a couple of months, but picked up a Saturday shift. I was helping a customer and the owner walked up and interrupted our conversation. "Is that your yellow car in parking lot?" Me, "Yes." Her, with the most demeaning tone, "On weekends, our parking lot is reserved for customers only. If you value your job you will go punch out, move your car to the lot across the street, and never park in the lot again." I was astonished. I had full-time jobs every summer since I was 15. I picked up holiday jobs. I had a lot of working experience. I had never been talked to like this by any coworker or boss before, particularly in front of a customer. I told her I was not aware of the parking rules, since I always worked weekdays, took off my apron, handed it to her, and said I will be punching out, but not punching back in. I quit. I told the customer I was sorry I was not able to finish helping him and walked out. I really needed the job, but was so pissed off I could not stand the idea of working there. My supervisor called me that afternoon and tried to get me to come back, but I just couldn't. Submitted by Mountain Biking Viking. Not really so much a F this shit moment as confirmation of F this shit. Senior. Software engineer role at a leading telecom in USA. One of 3 new devs to join the team. Manager decided it would be best to rotate support between the 3 newbies. Issues every night, sometimes all night. Huge pressure to work 60+ hour weeks with totally unrealistic goals. After a few months I realized this wasn't just a crunch period, this was going to be all the time. After giving notice, manager set me down and told a story of how I'd have to decide what was important and take life seriously. His example was getting a call to come back to the office for an emergency and handing his 2-year-old daughter off to a neighbor he didn't know so he could come work all night. Yeah, screw that. Then my last day the VP pulls the team together and absolutely rips into this guy for taking 20 minutes to support an issue since he was driving home at the time and couldn't log in immediately when called. Screw that shit. Think it says something that so many people think it could have been their telecom. Decided to add that, after giving notice the director told me they wanted to make a counter offer, but needed to wait until the VP got back from a trip. A week later the director comes to tell me the counter is that I should know the right thing to do is to stay and work through my issues. When I say no thanks he then explodes that I'm not giving 2 weeks from that point. He started threatening me, trying to keep me 1 more week, but I already had a start date at another company. I immediately went to ours who supported my 2-week notice. I've been with the same company since leaving there 14 years ago. I get to do challenging work with fun and intelligent people I consider friends, and I have plenty of time for my kids and hobbies. Submitted by the Devil's Advocate. I was working as a postie. Normally when a postie gets sick, the other posties have to cover his route. There were 7 of us, so it was annoying, but not too bad. I'd been there for a couple of years and had covered other people's sick days several times. Anyway, I got really sick. The sickest I'd been in my life up till that time. Had the flu, but it wound up making me look grey and shrunken and I got a migraine. Finally went back to work. I'd had 3 days off. Piles of mail were waiting for me. I don't know if they delivered any of it. Maybe they did. But there were huge piles waiting for me. And I was still sick. I only went back in because I was worried about the workload on them. I gave my notice, finished the week and then quit. Submitted by QED. I was working as a network engineer and due to mismanagement by owner, who took lavish trips every 3 months with family and kids friends. He had a payroll shortfall. His solution was to reduce my medical benefit, which included my family, to just me. Then 3 months later reducing my salary by 30%. When he told me, he also said that he expects me to work 50 to 60 hours a week until profits improve. Then said, "What do you think?" I said, "I quit." I worked for him 13 years. He has called many times to get me to help with special projects for his clients. I have politely refused. Submitted by Inhu. I was in my mid-20s, working myself to absolute death in a small town office supply store. I mean, the amount of work I was doing as a department specialist was staggering. I was basically working and running half the store myself, so the store manager didn't have to, while the assistant manager above me was doing nothing but taking a paycheck, stealing digital cameras, and lying about being a trained ninja, and staff was kept to a minimum to make store numbers look better. I was just straight up in retail hell. It's also important to note that my store manager was an arrogant, incapable asshole 2 steps from heart failure, who had been shunted to that small town store just to get him out of the way twice. They'd had to remove him for a while based on employee and customer complaints, some of them in the vein of sexual harassment. I don't know how he managed to keep his job. Anyway, one day, he comes up to me. He's concerned about my attitude. "Customers love you. You know what you're doing. You do great work. But as soon as you're not talking to a customer, your whole attitude changes. You never speak to me with respect or enthusiasm. I can see on your face that you don't want to be here. I mean, look at me. If you just improved your attitude and wanted to be here, you could be me in a couple years. Think about it. So I did. And that night, I went home, applied to go back to school, and quit my job the next day. Submitted by Shuffle 15. I worked in a bookstore and was about to get a monthly hour contract instead of just a call-up contract. Everything seemed to go fine. I even called up one of the higher-ups to confirm stuff was in order after some discussion about the amount of hours I should be working, until I realized I wasn't getting any wage declarations, or whatever they are called, anymore, and my paychecks seemed rather low for the amount I'd been working. Fast forward a few months later, COVID had hit, and I wasn't able to work anymore due to regulations, and I had been sending a mail every week about the paychecks, cause I didn't get a response. I finally get notice that there was an accident, because there was confusion over my contract. I wrote up a quick mail to the higher ups about some questions I had regarding their policy of payment through inability to work, and their lack of communication. I was expecting the boss to send me a mail, but after 2 weeks of nothing, he came by the store while I was working with customers without any indication and asked me what my problems were. Shaking and angry, I quickly listed my issues, and he dismissed all of them, saying the info was either none of my business or that it was outside of his control and could therefore not do anything. I was flabbergasted and felt isolated. My manager was willing to help, but was scared to speak up to the guy out of fear of losing her job. I decided to call up a public lawyer and help me out. A month later, I get a mail from the boss still claiming that everything was correct and that he would pay €250 to stay hush hush. I was fuming at this point and didn't give in. 2 weeks later, and he finally conceded in paying my wages correctly for that half year, amounting to almost €1,500. I had already written my resignation letter at this point, but boy did it feel good. Turns out they paid me for about 7 hours less per week for almost 4 months. Submitted by dam_dog_inappropriate. I was working a particularly awful nursing home as a CNA. I was bullied by some of the other CNAs as well as one terrible nurse. I put up with it for a year and put in my 2W notice. I only told management, not the other staff. On my second to last day there, that nurse decided to scream in my face about some imaginary infraction. About an hour later, I learned that the company that had bought the facility earlier in the year had decided anyone who'd been working there less than a year on the sale date would not get any vacation days. I'd also only be getting half my sick days paid out when I quit. That meant 2.5 days of pay. And I learned that if I didn't complete my 2 weeks of notice, I'd forfeit those 2.5 days. I realized 2.5 days of pay wasn't worth the abuse I was having to endure, and I told the doll at the end of that day that I was never coming back. She tried to talk me into it, but it didn't work. So that's my screw this shit, I'm out story. Submitted by Deedlit228. Worked for someone who hired her lazy ass brother-in-law as part of my team. I had to do all the work on my own, but not only did he take credit for my work, he threw me under the bus. Boss wanted to upgrade the antiquated system we were using, but the lazy ass said there was nothing wrong with our current system and blamed me for not knowing how to do it right, even though I was the one who made it work at all in the first place. Boss took his word for it and then told me I should learn how to do it properly under lazy ass's guidance. So I said screw this, and I turned in my resignation letter the next day. I offered to help train whoever they were gonna hire to replace me. Boss said, no need. Lazy ass can handle it. Okay then. A couple of months later, I get a text message from my old boss, who has never texted me before, acting like an old friend wanting to catch up, before asking me to come back. Submitted by Landho54. Got injured on the job to the point I had to be off to recover while receiving physical therapy. Went in one day just in time to have my hours call the physical therapist to tell her they'd cancelled my insurance. My physical therapist, to their credit, put the phone on speaker to let me hear what was going on. I'd been with the organization 16 years, had pulled numerous all-nighters, sacrificed events with my family and holidays, vacation time, you name it, and put up with a ton of shit from my boss and her cronies, the grown version of the mean girls if you will. According to them, I was often the most incompetent, lazy, terrible person there. I put up with it for way too long, because I loved the clients I worked with, and I believed in what we were doing. But that day was my, screw this shit, I'm out, moment. I cussed ours out over the phone, and never set foot in the place again. Not even to pick up my last paycheck, which was all of a measly $10 I'd earned the day I went back to work part-time, only to get yelled at for not writing someone else's press release to their liking. No regrets except I should have quit sooner. It's just not worth giving 200% when all you get back is the kind of criticism and backstabbing that makes you cry every night when you go home and cry every morning getting ready for work. Life is good now. Submitted by Duct Tape Chainsaw. I was the assistant manager of a local pizza franchise that barely exists anymore. I wonder why. The manager found a better opportunity somewhere else and left, and the woman they replaced him with was probably one of the dumbest people I've ever worked with. You see, we had this deal at our pizza chain, where you always got 2 pizzas with your order. No, it wasn't Little Caesars. Basically, all that was offered on the menu was a 2-for-1 deal for all pizzas. Well, we had one older gentleman who was living alone after his wife passed away, and he loved our pizza. He came in like twice a week, paid full price, but only had us make 1 pizza for him. He always firmly insisted on paying full price and only taking 1 pizza. So he comes in for his usual pizza run on this stupid manager's second day, and I grab his single pizza and hand it to him. She comes flying out of the office and starts yelling at me, "Where is his other pizza? Why are you trying to cheat this man?" So I calmly explained to her that this was his usual routine and he even told her he was happy with it. She flies into an even bigger hissy fit yelling something like, "Well, that's not company policy. He's only allowed to order what's on the menu, and we don't make special deals with specific customers." I looked at her and said, "You realize we're saving the company money by only making 1 pizza, and he's fine with that, right?" She screeches, "I don't care. I'm going to report you for this." So I pulled my apron off, threw it in her chest and said, "Don't bother, I quit. You're too stupid to work for," and walked out the door with the customer. We had a good laugh about it in the parking lot. Anyhow, I got a job at Blockbuster Video right after that, and that was an infinitely better job in every way. Submitted by Opposite Coon Dog. I was working for a small business as a dog trainer. I was the only trainer I had on staff at the time. I knew how much they were charging for my services, and of course I knew how much they paid me. It was equivalent to 10% commission. I asked for a significant raise and they dragged me around for a while, promising a raise then something always coming up. I wanted to leave then, but didn't have many other options, and was not confident enough to start my own business at the time. Fast forward a few months and word of mouth got around about the quality of my services, and I had more people trying to register than I could feasibly fit into my schedule, so I started to schedule people months away. My boss did not like this, and overrode my ability to book my own clients, overbooking me to the point where people's dogs were only getting a fraction of the training we were promising them. This went on for months, and when I went to the owner, he really didn't have much to do with the business. He just owned it. He said he would take care of it, but instead told my boss I went to him behind her back, and then she threatened to fire me. Lol. I was out of there so fast. Finally, my old boss got fired a few months after I left. Apparently a decent chunk of the staff followed my lead, and dipped once I was gone. Bye bye idiots. Submitted by Willspanner 666. I worked as a host at a BBQ joint for 2 years and 2 months. It was my first job, so I was afraid to call off. In that 2 years and 2 months I never called in sick once. I was late occasionally, but most of us were good about trading shifts. We'd text each other, "Hey, if you work for me Saturday I can work for you Tuesday," and stuff like that. It was nice. Made it real easy to never have to call off. Have never had that at a job since. Anyway, Friday night my friend had a party after work and invited almost everyone we work with. I didn't work that night and I didn't wanna go because I wasn't feeling good and we'd just adopted a new kitten the day before. Well, I was talked into going. My friend said just stay for like an hour then you can leave. You don't even have to drink. So me and my boyfriend go, but this party turned into what we all now refer to as the party from hell. I won't go into detail here, unless someone really wants me to, but long story short someone stole my boyfriend's keys. So we are stuck spending the night until his mom can come by in the morning and drop off a spare. I did not want to spend the night, because I had to open the next morning. His mom comes by with a spare, and we head home. One of my friends that was at the party calls me later to tell me she found her keys in her boyfriend's pocket. He stole them thinking it was hers, so she couldn't leave him. Again, long fucking story. After that shitstorm of a party, and having to share a pull-out couch with my boyfriend, and still being sick, I decide I'm calling off. I think I've never once called off. I know it's last minute, but what are they gonna do? No one answers cause we're still closed, cause like I said I was opening, so I leave a voicemail, and go to bed. Nothing like the feeling of your own bed after sleeping over somewhere. Well, I wake up a few hours later to a bunch of texts and missed calls. Turns out my managers are pissed that I called off. I call work and my friend answers, the one whose boyfriend stole our keys, and she tells me that the bosses are pissed and said I better come to work or else. I'm like, or else what? She's like, I don't know, but I've never seen them this upset. So I'm like, tell them I'm coming now. I was just gonna talk to them to tell them I've never called off in 2 years and 2 months. I know I was supposed to work a double and I called off last minute, but I cannot work today. Well, when I get there, my managers aren't even working. They have the day off and the assistant manager is in charge. Turns out, everyone heard about the party last night, thought I'd been drinking, and just assumed I had a hangover. Well, I set the record straight real quick and said, you know what, I quit. I'm putting in my 2 weeks notice. This is bullshit. Jim, something to sign. My AM is all like, wait now, wait a minute, don't do something you'll regret. I'm like, I've never once called off, and the first time I do, I'm told backquote come to work or else. That's bullshit. I'm not hungover, I was sick before I went to that party. I should've stayed home, I know, but I didn't. Ask anyone there. We spent the night cause someone stole our keys. I had a bad night, and it's been a bad day. I don't need this. She's going on about I just wanna make sure this isn't a spur of the moment decision, which it sure as hell was, but I didn't care. She kept telling me Fry Cook came to work after his dad's funeral, and Server worked while she was sick. She even threw up in that trash can over there and kept waiting tables. And I'm like, that's the problem. All of that is unhealthy, not to mention unsanitary, but the owners have everyone so afraid to call off that they're literally working themselves to death. But I won't. I'm too young to ruin my life like that. I came in the next day to open again, and my manager, the owner, just looked at me and said he thought I quit. I said I put in my 2 weeks and that I could work till they hired a replacement, but he said they didn't need me anymore. Told me to leave out the front door. I qualified for unemployment because they wouldn't let me work my 2 weeks. But I never looked back, and I still don't regret it. They ended up shutting down a couple years later, didn't even give any of the employees notice. Now they are being sued for not paying their rent. Karma's a bitch.